Okay, we'll call the meeting of May 5th, Cinco de Mayo to order. The first thing, once again, I have to make this announcement to, again, reprise our position here. So the meeting is being convened in compliance with Governor Cuomo's executive orders, which suspend certain provisions of the open meetings law to allow municipal boards to convene meetings via video conferencing without in-person attendance by the public. In addition, the public has been provided with the ability to view and hear the meeting. Better transcription, I hope this time. And a transcript will be provided at a later date. I note that there's a quorum for the meeting. The link to the live stream of the meeting has been provided to the public, and a video of the meeting will be made available on public access television, as well as a link on the town's website. All submission materials and agendas are available to be viewed on the town's website. And again, one other public interest announcement, and that is if you haven't been counted yet, please complete the Census 2020. It's well underway. The census helps to determine funding for valuable federal programs such as schools, roads, healthcare, and public safety. Every household will receive a census invite, you probably already got it, in the mail that can be completed in less than 10 minutes online, by phone, or by paper questionnaire. Remember that spending 10 minutes on the census will help the town receive its fair share of federal funding for the next 10 years. So let's make everyone count by completing the census form. That's it for public announcements, unless there's a Girl Scout or Boy Scout thing I've missed, cookies, whatever. So anyway, here we go. We have tonight, our first matter is an informal hearing before the board. This is and forgive me, Joe, if I mispronounce your name, Bashkowski. Is that close?
Etchkowski, yeah.
Okay. For 23 Heathcote Drive, application for a lot line adjustment at 23 Heathcote Drive.
Great. So should I get started?
Yep.
Great. This is our first time here, so take it easy on me. My wife's sorry she couldn't join. Unfortunately, her grandmother passed away 2 days ago, and the service is going on virtually right now. So I stepped away for a minute, but she wishes she could be here.
Very sorry to hear that.
Condolences.
Yeah, no, thank you. Look, I think ours is fairly straightforward. I believe we, our brief background is we moved to Chappaqua about in 2014. We moved from Hoboken, New Jersey, which is quite rare. Most people from New Jersey move west, not north, and we did, and we brought 4 families with us. I mentioned this because we originally moved down the street at 39 Heathcote Drive. And the thing we loved about Heathcote was we loved the location. We didn't realize how much we loved the location, but we really do love it, being so close to the Kittle House and other things. Flat street. We have 3 young boys. We only had 1 when we moved here, and now we have 3 young boys. And they're some of the earliest of their friends to ride bikes because of the flat street. A few years ago, Steve Tavolacci bought some land down the street from the O'Neills and started to develop it. He built a house, which I had no intention of buying. And a friend of mine went by and actually looked at the house, and he thought I should look at it. And my wife and I did. And, we realized that as our family was growing, this house would have been a better fit for us on 2 parts. One of it being the actual layout of the house. It had an extra bedroom, an extra car garage, and some of the more modern layouts, but also the land. So we were on an acre lot, and the other one, and the lot being offered here, there are 2 lots, but the way we looked at it was one contiguous piece of property. So we haven't done anything with the property since we purchased it. We hired Sean Jansky, who's here with me today, and Jackie Helms, his associate, and then Peter Gregory is an engineer here with us tonight. But we hired Sean to start looking at landscaping. We literally haven't planted anything since we bought the house, to just start developing the land. And shortly after that, we came to realize 2 things. One, that our entire basic yard that we have now is encumbered by the house and the septic system. So that makes up the front lot, if you will, that the house is on. The rear lot has nothing on that. And again, what appealed to us at the time was that this was a completely flat property with no wetlands that we could potentially grow into and serve other uses. But we came to realize that we could not put an accessory use on that back lot unless it was merged with the first lot. So that is our intention right now, to merge the lots. We don't have any specific plans for the lot at this time, but that is what we're here to do, and a little bit of the background on why.
Okay, thank you. Do any of does Mr. Gregory wish to make any statements at all, or should we just
Well,
go to some of the...
I do have a copy of the plan that I could put up and share if you'd like.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that'll be very helpful.
Okay. So this is the plan that we're referring to. Mr. Bekowski resides at 23 Heathcote, which is located in the front, would be the eastern portion. And then to the rear of the property is the large vacant piece, which is approximately 2.67 acres. The application would request that we would remove a portion of this property line here and merge the two parcels together. As was previously mentioned, you can see how this property is constrained with the septic system located to the rear of the property, the house and driveway, but the front of the property is encumbered with the stormwater mitigation that was required at the time that house was constructed. This is the existing condition that we are looking at right now, and this would be our proposed lot configuration or amended lot once the two properties would be merged, indicating on this what our new zoning setbacks would be, fronts, side, and rear. And you can see where the extent of the septic system would run and the area that would become available should anything be, designed or desired to be constructed in that, location. So what we're looking to do is to move forward with this lot line adjustment and have those two properties merged to consider for future use on that portion of the property.
Okay. Sabrina's not here right now, but Bob, could you run through your comments, and then we'll ask Dennis to run through his comments?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Basically, the way I set up my memo was I had certain notes and added clarification should be added to the existing conditions plan, which is EC1, EC2, EC3, which pretty much consists of basically tax lot data, wetlands or regulated wetlands buffer should be shown, and also the existing water main on the existing plan. And then I switch on over to the preliminary plat comments, which basically are just things that should be on there, not superly important, but they should be shown there nonetheless, such as the section, block, and lot. Again, it should always show the associated wetlands and buffer. Westchester County buffer jurisdiction is P3. P4 is basically, you should show the existing line between the two before it was joined as one lot. And the labeling system should be a lot A, not to create any confusion with the parcel numbers. That's P5. P6 is the title of the re-subdivision that I recommend be on the subdivision map. And P7 is basically a designations and referencing that should be made in the title to other filed maps around the perimeter. And P8 is basically items that should be shown on the plat that would be required pretty much by the Westchester County Clerk's Office. And that should be all signed and sealed by a New York State professional land surveyor, where I outline items A through I. And that is all I have in this memo for this application.
Okay. Dennis, would you like to run through your comments?
Sure. I guess first off, I have to start by saying I have two memorandums, and I guess that evolved because when this application was initially supposed to appear for April 7th, that memorandum, which I generated March 31st, was really the results of a site reconnaissance and looking at Lot 27, having no other information with respect to, environmental, I'll say, site conditions. And then on the 7th, Mr. Gregory was able to email me a PDF copy of the wetland delineation report that was done in September of 2016, and at around the same time, said application is now moved to tonight's agenda. So the second memo now is the culmination of site reconnaissance, review of this memorandum, obviously review of the federal manual that how to identify and delineate wetlands. And so that's the memo that I'm going to be commenting from, if that's clear.
Dennis, is that the May 1st memo?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I find this to be, it's a difficult site, obviously, and then, difficult in terms of wetland identification, because in reviewing Mr. Janning's report, and then Steve Coleman's memo, which, summarized that report, there's obviously not the level of hydrology that was present at that time that I was able to witness. And by level, I'm not talking about the entirety or surface area of Lot 27. I'm just talking about, as I tried to hand draw and indicate, sort of that center spine whereby, there's just a lot of hydrology here. It seems to be concentrated to the center, but understandably, I guess it wasn't there in the fall. And I didn't take any soil borings for my reconnaissance, but in looking at Mr. Janning's report, he did, and obviously indicated that some of those borings did come up as hydric soils. So my memorandum, did its best to sort of go through taking that data, taking data that I witnessed with respect to hydrology, and then how, with respect to the manual that we use in Chapter 137 to identify wetlands, how in that approximate center spine area, I feel that there is a wetland. Again, I don't think it's the entirety of Lot 27, but it's just not clear to me, where that is, because it's never been marked as one, delineated as one, and I think that there is one, and that should be included on any map. And as indicated in Steve's memo, I guess historically in '85 it was once indicated as a wetland and then removed as a result of the 2016 investigation. I wasn't that clear on all the history, but it's just another case study of, manipulated wetlands and historical uses, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's not easy to be able to, the majority of the year, be able to walk out to a site and say, yep, it's wetlands. So that's why I recommended that, since this is the time of the year where you have your best indicators of hydrology, I think a spring delineation to compare it to this fall delineation would be most prudent.
Okay. But that's not to say that the applicant is not applying for any activity in this area. So I guess this would just be for marking the maps and for in perpetuity, so we understand what's there. But again, to be clear, the applicant's not proposing any activity, so they're not going to propose or need to get, it seems to me, a wetland application, right?
Correct. I just want to make sure on the last page of my memo, they're not identifying wetlands on the lot. So I'm not comfortable with that conclusion at this stage.
Right, I understand. Okay.
Well,
Any questions, comments from the applicant or board members on Dennis's observations and memo?
Yeah, I do.
I do too. Tom, you go first.
Okay, thanks, Greg. I actually think that it's with respect to Dennis's concerns about the wetland, which may or may not be there. We're yet to determine that. But if you go on the town GIS mapping system, you will be able to see this the entire neighborhood. And what's interesting about the neighborhood is that it really sits on a plateau, which has on one side the ravine that the valley that the sawmill runs in. On the other side is the golf course. Both of these are in low areas, and there's a plateau that not only does Heathcote sit on, but also Cowden Lane, and I think the other one is Petersville Road. Do I have that right?
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
So there are three fingers of development that go from the road north, and it's interesting to me that for some reason there's sort of an anomaly. There you go. Excellent. Thank you. There's sort of an anomaly here. Can I get my my cursor on the screen?
I believe you can.
How do I do that?
In the top,
Tom, you have to turn on your annotation toolbar.
the green bar at the top, it says view options next to it.
Yes.
You click the drop down and then select annotate.
Yes.
And then you can click on mouse or an arrow or whatever you want over there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
I did that.
Hey, get off my drawing. So can everybody see my cursor?
Yes. Is that you?
Yes.
No, that's me.
No, this is me.
Right.
Well,
Where?
you may have to draw something, Tom. Maybe
Okay,
that.
I'll draw something. So let's see, along.
There it is.
Here we go. So
Yeah.
there is right in here, there is you can see it right in here. There's a
Where?
sort of anomaly right in here, which is
Ah.
sort of leftover area between what are two normal sort of zoning, two roads with standard zoning lots on them. And for some reason, this center spine, and Dennis, I wonder, when you use the word spine, were you referring to this? Because these are lots that separate tax lots that look like they are attached in ownership to the abutting lots, which are on Heathcote and Cowden. That's certainly the case with the Singh lot, which we're going to see soon, and the lot we're talking about now. And it's interesting to me that these just somehow got left over. Maybe it's just because of the geometry of how the streets and subdivision got laid out, and so these just ended up being leftover parcels. I don't know what the history is, but the effect of the history is that if you go to if you look at a Google Earth view of this area that I've outlined is just complete green. And if you look at the town, if you add the topography to this map we're looking at now, you'll see that right along the line of where lots 29, 28 join lots 27, 26, that appears to be a low area of potential drainage. And it seems to me that this is if you add up all the area in the spine, it ends up being like 20, 25 acres, something like that. It's a very, very big area. And I wonder if it should be some thought to thinking about this in a more comprehensive way or holistic way, and say that we're just not talking about this one lot. We really ought to be thinking about this particular lot along with the Singh application and along with the other lots that are in the spine, which are just green areas, or just north. And think about whether maybe this requires some extra consideration, some thought about extra protections. I have no idea what the right response is at the moment, but it seems to me that it requires a little bit of thought, and it would be very useful if you go to the Google Earth view of this, because it jumps right off of the photograph.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, my apologies for coming late to the meeting. I was tied up in another meeting. I think Mr. Curley raises a very valid issue, and I think it gets at the heart of to what Dennis was looking for in regards to more information. And I think I know that the plans that you submitted do not show any activity in the back of the house, but the narrative speaks of creating a play area for kids and kind of clearing out to a certain extent in the back of the house. And so my question would be, and one of my points in my memo is to really get a sense of what is planned. And I apologize for not hearing your opening and your presentation, but to really understand the natural environment back there, kind of getting at what Dennis was asking for in relation to the natural area, and then how much future disturbance could be expected from joining the lots. And for the board's information, right now on the front lot, this whole action, just back up a second, would be a type 2 action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. The coverage, there's an overage and development coverage on the primary lot with the house on it right now. There's 10,104 square feet of coverage, and it's over by 1,360 square feet. So the lot line change will bring that coverage into compliance. But I think that the bigger question is how much of that back lot will be cleared or regraded or encroached upon. Particularly given the fact that it is currently in a natural state and does provide a habitat corridor, if not additional water quality benefits.
Sabrina, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sabrina, if the lot line, if the lots aren't joined, and it is we don't know what the future plans are from the applicant to use this piece of property once they are joined. But is there any reason why, are there any restrictions on this property now that would prevent the applicant from clearing it to make a play area or putting another structure on there, an accessory building on there?
I would defer to Dennis and the wetland. You know, he raised some.
From a zoning.
Excuse me?
From a zoning.
From a zoning perspective, no. I think that, you know, they'd have to adhere to coverage requirements. They would have to adhere to, you know, setbacks and other site requirements. There's nothing that would prevent them from clearing that lot other than our environmental regulations that, you know, regarding tree removal and wetland protections.
Thank you.
And the wetland protections, if we go out there and survey and we find there is a wetland and it's more than, I don't know what the minimum is, 100 square feet, you know, then it becomes a wetland and there's a buffer around it, right? Which would
correct
impede buildings and that sort.
So Dennis, Dennis, the area that you saw, can you give us an idea of how big it is? I mean, if you used what Tom did with your cursor, is it a little area around 27? Is it the whole space? I'm trying to get a level of magnitude of what may be considered a wetland.
I tried in my March 31st memo, there was included I just did a hand-drawn color aerial sort of depicting, you know, and I was using the constructed homes on Heathcote sort of as my visual guide to sort of draw in that blue finger of where I thought potential length and width of where that wetland would be. So it was just restricted to lot 27. It's not obviously the configuration or size of what Mr. Curley drew. And I would say you're looking at, you know, my verbal description of a central spine. I would say if you could take half of lot 27 down the middle and draw a narrow, you know, finger or corridor, I really feel that was the concentration point of, you know, the hydrology that I saw, and it covered about half the lot in distance.
Right, so if
Half
that,
of the new lot, half of the dark yellow one, right?
yeah, 27.
Almost if you could buy,
Yellow one.
if you could bisect 27, it's like kind of down the central, but only half in length.
So what I'm thinking is if there is wetlands in the center, by the time you put in the buffer and you do the setbacks from the property line, you may find that a lot of this lot can't be developed. And is that why we have 6, 7 landlocked lots in the middle that they couldn't be developed?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure that. I think there are a couple of things, if I may. Again, this is my
Sure.
first time coming to this, and I know everyone's trying to get to the right answer and
Sure.
you know, do their jobs here. I think a couple of things. One, you know, we try to do our homework as homeowners and purchasers as best we could, and we went on to the county website, the local website, every website we could find that was meant to identify wetlands, and there were no wetlands here. When I spoke with Mr. Tavolacci, who was selling the house, and I asked if there were wetlands in the back, he said there were not. And he produced the study that Mr. Corelli referenced.
Mhm.
And it you know, again, to me, that looked like a reputable study. And the fact that the town had been in communication on it, that seemed meaningful to me. And I went out and I walked it myself. And you know, like any piece of property, there's parts that are a little wet, parts that aren't, but it was not wetlands. I've seen, you know, wetlands. Again, I'm not qualified to make that determination, but we did our work. And as I mentioned going in, that was a big reason why we bought the house, was to have access to this lot, and there are plenty of lots in Chappaqua that are big by acreage, but that can't be used for rock formations or wetlands or whatnot. I think a big reason that this land is here, as well as Mr. Singh's land is here, is this was all owned by the O'Neill family for a very long time. It was all one estate. I think there was some agriculture that was done on here a long time ago. I don't know the full history of it, but there was some, there was some agriculture that was done. Further, I think some of the reason why some of the lots are not built on, all of these were part of a larger tract of land that was owned by the Reader's Digest building or Reader's Digest company a long time ago, and that was sold, and they limited the amount of homes that could be built in this area. And so the fact that the homes were built along the streets and not into the, back into the land, that makes sense to me, to give buffer to the existing residences so that they can, not have people in their backyards. So that's my background. As I said, I wanted, everybody to feel comfortable with this and do whatever we have to take the appropriate steps. But it's not frustrating to hear, but a little surprising to hear that when there was such extensive studies done to prove there were no wetlands, that now, for no other reason than a lot merger, we're not jumping through hoops, but it becomes a big question. I don't know why anything, like, we haven't done any, I can confirm we haven't done anything to the land. I know Mr. Singh hasn't done anything to the land to disturb it, to create a wetland, since the time that it was purchased.
Well, let me just observe that I appreciate entirely the position you're in with respect to the research that you did, which is prudent and admirable. That doesn't necessarily set the precedent that the town shouldn't confirm the information you have. And I think that that's merely the process that we're going through now. I don't think anybody is yet saying, unless I'm wrong, Dennis, that we're certifying that there's a wetland there. I think we're in the process of looking to see.
No, I appreciate that. And I just, again, while we're talking about the subject and how we got here, I thought it was helpful to have that context. As far as what use we would have for this, I think, as one of you mentioned, I guess we could go back and, as two lots, we can clear off some of the land, or start using it as a separate lot right now if we wanted to. Would more be for an accessory structure. Look, the reality is there's kind of two things we would potentially do some sort of a sport court or a pool, right? I mean, when you think about structures and what you would do, ideally, we would want to have something as close to the house as possible. And again, we're conflicted by having the septic on our existing lot. We thought the most appropriate thing would be to not disturb the septic fields or to do a massive clearing in the back to to do septic in the back lot, but rather to potentially put something like that as close to our house as we can and separate it from the neighboring properties. I did ask Sean Jansky, our landscape architect, to put together a crude drawing. These aren't like it's nothing detailed, but it's meant to be an illustration of what we would be considering. And I don't know if that's helpful. We can share that with you now.
Which environmental zone are we in here, Dennis? Is this the environmental district with the 150 or the 100 setback?
100.
Okay, thank you. And the other issue, Dennis, when you were out there and you observed some of these issues and conditions, was there any sort of could you figure any sort of function that might be provided? Was there any kind of water flood containment? Did this flow down through lot 25 and then exit down to eventually the sawmill? I'm just trying to get some sort of feel. I'm familiar with some of the areas here, unfortunately, been around too long because the Petersville area was a tough situation for the town many years ago. In addition to citing something like this, one of the issues is that we look at the function. And I want to throw out to the applicant that, the fact that if a wetland is determined to be there, we still have wetland permits, and depending upon the value, function, and what it's actually doing here, you can always apply for a permit for whatever activity you might want to pursue on this property. But again, that will be determined in terms of the size of the wetland, and again, our buffers work 100 feet from the wetland itself.
Okay.
So this is Eldad. I understand the concern in general to have a true understanding of what's happening in this back lot, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the applicant is merely asking for an elimination of a lot line, and I guess Joe, as well, condolences to you and your wife's family. What is what is the potential timing here, and why is this being done possibly in two steps? Like, why now if you don't really know what you're going to do down the road?
Just because we know it's a necessary step. There is some, there's some administrative benefit of having it as one lot. There's some potential tax benefits I've heard from other people in town that have done similar things. But really, our kids are young and they grow up really fast, and to take one step out of the process, this step might take us 2-3 months. We were scheduled to go last meeting. It got delayed for, administrative reasons, which are understandable. So, I'm sort of the belief that Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong, and more the, I don't know if it's the Murphy's Law, but the construction law that, anything, or development law, anytime you're doing anything, it takes longer than you expect it to. So we just want to get that ready. We're not, like I said, obviously this crisis that we're going through has economic and financial impacts that might adjust our plans. We did join Whippoorwill Country Club this year, so we do have access to a pool and social environment there. Again, I don't know if it's going to open this year, but that was the intent. But we don't have, we don't have specific timing on it. It could be as early as next year. It could be 3 or 4 years.
I have a comment. I think that someone suggested this was agricultural land, and I think I saw some comment that there may have been pipes in the ground or something like that. Those would probably be drainage pipes, because the area in the past, the long distant past, probably was a wetland, but then it's been modified if it's for agriculture, because you can't have agriculture on wetlands, the crops won't grow. So there were man-made changes. And Dennis, I don't know how that fits into the overall picture, in that this has been modified. I can't, you know, in my head see that we would want somebody to restore it to its original conditions.
No.
But it's sort of a, you know, is it intermittent? If it's intermittent, then maybe there's a different synopsis or a different conclusion we reach. So there is a need for, definitely, as you suggest, Dennis, there's a need to map it and get a better sense of what it is. And hopefully it's small and intermittent. For if I were the applicant, that would be what I'm hoping for. If not, then we have to see, you know, how it goes, you know, with it being declared to be a wetland.
Right.
So-
And to your point, you know, historically, the wetland that, you know, that I feel was there, because that's why you put tile drains in, like you said, could have been bigger. And now what we're left with is this relicit spine. That's, you know, I mean, honestly, when I first went out there, it, you know, something just hit me that, like, this is kind of odd. I have no history of the site. I'm like, okay, it's pretty wet in the center. Wow, we're really void of vegetation, but it seems to increase in density of vegetation. Granted, you know, it's non-hydrophytic, but it really seems to increase as we move out of this hydric area. And I don't have an auger with me to look at soils. And then when I looked at Mr. Janning's report, I'm like, oh, wow, there's hydric soils here. That's interesting. That doesn't happen overnight. You know, so there definitely was a, you know, my experience, and obviously the manual that we use knows full well, because it's written in such a fact that, you know, inevitably, if you do wetlands work long enough, you're going to encounter either a disturbed, which is what the tile drains and trying to manipulate the hydrology fall under, or a problem area wetland. And problem area is that certain times of the year, certain criteria are not going to be there to make a wetland determination easy. And I just kind of happened to walk in upon this. And that's, you know, I'm kind of at a position where I can't unsee what I've seen. So that's why I'm kind of going down the road of where I can't just accept a fall delineation from 2016 as the determination for lot 27 in the area that I saw.
Dick, I was out there prior to our last meeting when this was supposed to appear first, and drove around a bit. And to the north, if you take Heathcote north, and there, it's not on our map. I forget what the connecting road is back there.
It's Stockton.
Stockton, thank you.
Yeah.
And make a left on Stockton and then look back into this wooded area. You could see that water is daylighting. I don't know whether it's out of a culvert or a spring, but there's water daylighting and then in the woods and then crossing underneath the road. I don't know whether that's an intermittent spring, or I have no idea what it is. It may be part of the leftover, if there was an agricultural drainage system, it might be, you know, leftover structure from that. I have no idea, but if you look at the topography of the area, which is not on the map we're looking at now, but you can add the layer and look at the topography. You can see that Cowden Lane is on a ridge line. It's not a steep ridge line, but it's the high point. And then the topography falls off towards Heathcote. And along the line of parcels 29, 28, 30, right in there, that's where it falls most steeply. And then when it gets to parcels 26, 27, 25, it flattens out. So it might be that is where this wetland is collecting, this bottom of that slope, if there is a wetland, where the water is collecting in any event, and maybe it's just after, you know, sheet flow after rainfall. I have no idea, but that's the nature of the topography. And there is this structure, this daylighting of water that's happening to the north of here.
Bob,
Yeah,
do you recall I think that area, Bob, if you recall when the Tavolacci's were here regarding one of the lots, you had questioned them about that. Do you remember, Bob?
I don't recall that. When they were originally building the lot,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember coming that up. I remember Steve Coleman, though, mentioning about that area that Dennis is speaking of at a prior application, I guess, when Joe was coming in. And it was brought up. I don't know what investigative work Stephen had done. I'm not quite sure where it fell off of, but I believe it should be in the file if we can find it. And that's the only thing I recall on that site when Mr. Tavolacci came in previously.
So,
I just-
so you know, I think that there was, and it came out. I'm not sure when. We'd have to do some more research on it to really figure out whether or not there's a system in there.
Is it?
Well, I would say that to move this along a little bit, I think the applicant needs to make a decision as to whether or not they're willing to take a look and have this recommended wetlands delineation performed as Dennis has suggested. We normally look at these lot line adjustments really quite quickly and administratively, usually. But in this particular case, the board may be reluctant to grant the lot line change to protect this wetland until we find out what's in there. And as I understand it, lot 27 is a landlocked lot, and therefore improvements can't be made to that lot unless the lot line is changed. I mean, you can do some clearing subject to the tree law, but it seems to me that we need to get this, we need to move this forward and get the applicant moving forward with what they'd like to do. And it seems to me that we need this information before we can move forward. It seems to me that it would be a fairly quick, easy process once we are mapped the wetland area to take a look at this lot line. Whether or not we look later on at a future application, that's a different situation. But going back to Eldad's comment and observation, you know, this is a lot line change, which is got a little bit of hair to it because of this issue of the wetland.
I agree with all that. One other comment about mapping. Sometimes the USGS maps had reasonable detail, and some of the older maps, they sort of roughly marked out where they were wetlands. Now, this may have been too small at that time, you know, for like an 1890 USGS map or something like that, to have this map. That would be helpful to the applicant. More so if there was nothing there than if there was a little bit of there. But I think that's where we have to go. It's up to the applicant, as the chairman mentioned.
Well, I have a question for the board. I'm kind of thinking of the applicant here and a statement about, you know, taking things in little steps. If the applicant is just looking to adjust a lot line, they're not looking to do any work. If they wanted to do work in the future, they have to come back to get the appropriate couldn't then we ask them to do the wetland delineation?
I would.
I mean, I'm just saying, are we making the hurdle too high? I'm asking a question. Are we making the hurdle too high?
Can I just ask what they would be applying for as the environmental coordinator, because there's no wetland there now officially?
Well, they would, if they came back to put in a swimming pool, and I'm sure we could do something in some kind of resolution or notes that this is going to be on the record. If they came back for a swimming pool or a tennis court, or to clear it out to put a flat lawn area like some applicants like to do, wouldn't then be the time where the board would say, you need to get this delineated, and then we would know which way they could go?
I think Greg makes a very good point, and the question to Dennis and Sabrina is, can we go ahead and grant this joining these two lots without doing the wetland investigation? It seems to me as though we can, but maybe I'm wrong.
You absolutely can go ahead and do the lot line adjustment without it. I think that you would want a note on the plan that says if there's to be any clearing or earth moving, that they provide an analysis as to whether or not a wetland is present, and go from there. And in that way, The site plan will be notated, the resolution will be specified. If they come in for a building permit, they'll have that documentation, so they'll need to provide it with a building permit.
Yeah, and I would add, it's clearing, it's
tree
construction
permit.
also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah,
If they want to go take out
whatever they
anything.
do back there.
Right.
I'm supportive of this approach. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially given the request by the applicant that it's just a elimination of the lot line. It makes sense. Good idea, Greg.
Oh, you started it.
I think it makes good sense too. So why don't we do it that way? If we think that we're confident we can put in the necessary precautions to trigger a look at some subsequent time, makes sense to me.
And this would be development of the area, or construction or anything else on both lots in addition, because right now one of the numbers is being exceeded, and so you can't add a pool, or a tennis court's huge, but let's say a sports area, as I think the applicant mentioned. I think it has to apply to both parcels, or the entire parcel once it's joined.
Agreed. Once it's joined, the entire parcel.
Right. It'll take care of that
These
issue.
will all be kind of wrapped into the resolution of approval.
Okay.
Okay.
Clinton, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
That approach?
I think it makes good sense.
Okay. Good.
So you would
Okay.
need to set a public hearing.
Pardon? What was that? I didn't hear it.
Set a public hearing?
Oh, we do have to set a public hearing for this. Okay.
Yes, you do.
Can we waive jurisdiction on this, Sabrina? Is there something here that is preventing us from waiving jurisdiction and waiving a public hearing? We don't have any
I think
environmental
you can.
permits.
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can. The only issue is that typically with a lot line change, if we would have noticed this first meeting. If it was looked like we were gonna not do the public hearing or waive jurisdiction, I defer to Clinton on that.
I was afraid you were going to say that, and I haven't looked at it.
Sorry.
I believe you can, by my recollection, I'm afraid I would just be, I believe you can proceed to final without doing anything, but I don't know about I don't know about a hearing. I would suggest you go ahead and move and set a public hearing for whenever your next meeting, or the next meeting that can fit with notice. I'll look it up. If it's not necessary, you don't need to give the notice, Sabrina, and Bob, the planning board, can just discontinue the hearing. If it is required, it'll be on and you can have the hearing.
Well, I just saw one of a note on the chat here from a member of the public, a neighbor. So I think it's important to recognize this. I think perhaps we better go to a public hearing here. I just saw a note from one of the neighbors saying their concern is that that there not be any clearing of the lot 27 behind their lot. You know, yeah, exactly. So I think there's a little bit more to this. These are very strange lots, and they do impact other property owners. So I think there might be a little bit more here. So I'd appreciate if the applicant can deal with us one more time for a public hearing. We get the information here from members of the public and comments. It is a strange. It's almost like a flag lot, and you know we have real allergies toward flag lots. I'm not saying it is a flag lot, but it sure looks a little bit and performs in some ways as a flag lot. So we have to be careful here, I think.
Understanding the applicant's desire to move forward and the board's willingness to kind of take it step by step, if you will, if the board agrees and Chairman, you feel it appropriate, staff can draft a draft resolution for the same meeting where you would set the public hearing. So in essence, you could combine two actions in one, provided it's the board's preference.
I'm with that.
Yep, I think that would be a great one-step approach.
I agree.
Good.
Okay. So then I would offer that the June 2nd meeting would be prime for the public hearing and a draft resolution to be provided to the board or discussed for the board.
Terrific. Do we need a motion for the drafting of the resolution? Okay, is there a
Yes.
motion to direct staff to draw up a draft resolution for the meeting of June 2nd on this application?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, if not, we'll see the applicant on June 2nd. for a
Wait,
public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, because it is virtual, it has been asked that you do a roll call, or Felicia does a roll call for the vote. In addition, you need to set the public hearing.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll do a roll call vote. Dick,
I'm here.
you aye or nay? I heard aye before.
I'm with it.
Okay.
I'm yay.
Eldad?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And I'm aye, so that's 5-0. And then
Okay.
we need a motion to set the public hearing on June 2nd.
So
If
moved.
so, is there such a motion?
Yes, motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
We'll do the roll call again. Dick?
Aye.
Eldad?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And I'm aye. Okay, 5-0. Okay.
Before we leave this, one typo.
Okay.
All right, why not get it fixed now? In the final subdivision plat application, page 8, in two places it asks for the development coverage, and in one place it ends in 725 and the other 735. If someone would be so kind to decide which it is, then next time we can move that forward too.
And make sure it's consistent with what's on the plan.
That too, a triple check.
Terrific. Okay,
All
very
right.
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Have a good
night.
night.
Thank you all.
Okay, we move now to our next application, next item. And excuse me, this is an informal hearing for Singh 15 Heathcote Drive, application for a subdivision approval, lot line amendment, merger, wetland permit, tree removal permit, and stormwater permit, 15 Heathcote.
Good evening. Can you all hear me? This is Jerry Barrett.
Yes, Jerry.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to discuss this application with the board. Dr. Singh is with us and he'd like to observe and see what's going on. Alan Pilch is our civil engineer. He is here as well, and he is prepared to respond to some of the comments that Mr. Scully made. And we also have asked Brad Schwartz to join us. He is the project attorney who is helping us with the ZBA application, and in fact recommended to us that we make the FAR compliant. And so it was in light of the new information that came out recently from Mr. Corelli, we asked Brad to join in. I don't think he's ready to discuss it yet with us because, this is all new to us, but I just want to introduce you and let you know that we're all here and we're all ready to discuss it.
Okay.
My screen is coming up now. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So let's see. The Singh property. This is the Singh property on, hopefully you can see this little pointer. The Singh property is right in this area here. Here is the property. It's right in this area. You guys just finished discussing this property right here. Is just north of us. So this is Dr. Singh's property. where he has his front lot that we are proposing to merge with his rear lot, which is right in this area. And you guys just finished discussing this piece of property that is connected to the Bukowski house, which I believe is right here. So we've gone through staff comments, and I'm trying to get to the next screen. We've gone through the staff comments. Carrie, how do I get rid of this pointer?
I'm sorry, you're trying to use the pointer, or?
Well, I'm trying to get to my next screen, and it's not letting me because I'm still in the pointer. I guess I have to hit annotate.
Go up. Yeah, go
you
up.
have to escape it.
Escape it.
If you go up to the top where you got the pointer, you should be able to get out of it there.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to get to the site plan because this is the subject of what we want to talk to the board about. So I think what we'd like to do is we'd like to briefly go through the town planner's memo, briefly go through the town engineer's memo, and then end up at Mr. Corelli's memo. And of course, Mr. Corelli did make the comment that it was premature for him to fully comment on the application because of the foregoing that we still have to figure out what's going on the adjacent lot that the board just finished discussing. So we've gone through Sabrina's comments, and we really have no problems with the points that the town planner is making. You know, one of the things that we tried to do since we last talked to the board was we tried to, I think, to try to take this. What we did was when Campbell Engineering first designed this septic area, they had the primary over here, and so we worked with Michael and said, why can't we switch this, and why can't we put the primary up front? And what we're going to try to do is put the primary up front and not have to build this. And we have, as we get down to the alternative septic plan. So what we would be doing is, so this is the plan that was before the board originally, and for whatever reason, Campbell Engineering had the primary back here. If the Westchester County Health Department would be amenable to it, Dr. Singh is amenable to it, and what we could do is we can not clear this whole area back here. So this is the alternative plan, and Dr. Singh is willing to pursue that. And so that would just limit the amount of disturbance we would have to do in that area. So that's something that we have no problem doing with, and we're certainly willing to go through that. As I said earlier, Dr. Singh at one point did have a much larger house to meet his family's needs. And we realized it was going to be a difficult sell to the zoning board, and consulted with Brad Schwartz, and he convinced us, and we think it was the right decision. Let's make it work. And we did. We met with the building inspector. We brought in a local architect to work with the building inspector. And the consensus was that we have developed an FAR compliant plan at this point. So we no longer need to go to the zoning board. One of the comments that was being talked about throughout the project was about the amount of impervious area that the driveway was taking up. What can we do with that? And one of the comments from the board was, can we take some of this paving out of the middle and put, some kind of planting, which we did. We also went in and took like a center area of what I call the garage parking court and changed that to impervious, to permeable pavers. I do note that the town planner's memo said, is there anything further that can be done? I did discuss with my client this afternoon as what if we came in this area right in here, and what if we made that whole thing impermeable, permeable surface? So extend this pattern, and we'll just do the whole thing. So do what we can to, especially in the flatter areas where the permeable pavers will work better. This is going to be quite flat in here, so my client is willing to do that to further decrease the impervious areas associated with the driveway. One of the comments that was brought up was the location of the house. We do have the house about 30 feet farther back than what was the Tabo house, and I know we had this conversation with the board before, and I think it makes sense where we have the house, and I think so because as you drive down the street, I think to have the house farther forward is going to actually constrict it's going to constrict the view down the street to some of the very handsome homes on this street. I think it's going to make it seem more open. And I think there's something to be gained instead of having every house 30, every house in the same position. I think there's something to be gained to have a little diversity there. And certainly the house on the corner is a historic house, and that one doesn't recognize that. So I think that this really works well. The other thing is, we're working with Alan Pilch, and he'll be talking about the stormwater, but he really needs this area in here to make his stormwater management work. And then, of course, we have a transition slope to get up to the plateau where the house is. So we really have this thing positioned where, we have the stormwater management area, we have our slope coming up, then we have our driveway and our house. So we kind of think that we have the house in a good location. We haven't changed the planting plan. If the board will recall, we still have this very dense, this is going to be these red dots you see. These are the demarcation points. This will be in a protected area that will never be cleared. It will always be a vegetated hedgerow to provide a nice buffer between the neighbors. It's good for our client. It's good for the neighbor.
Alan, would you have, excuse me, I'm sorry, Jerry, the planting along the eastern, eastern line on the lot that you're, all the way up on the top, opposite, I'm pointing with my hand, that's really helpful. Opposite the septic, further up on the lot that you're going to merge, what kind of planting are you putting in there?
Well,
I see something in the corner, but I'm talking about the other lot, up, right there.
Mr. Here?
Yeah.
Well, here, what we're proposing to do. Let me see if I can blow that up a little bit. Does this work? So this will be our grading and clearing limit line, which we know we have to get that on the plan. But this is our clearing and grading limit line. So we've got an 18-inch tree, a 12-inch tree, a 48-inch oak, a 10-inch maple, a 10-inch maple, a 30-inch oak. We're going to keep all that there. If we can go in then, and where we do have some gaps, and we could plant with some evergreen trees, that's what we're proposing. So we're proposing to keep a natural buffer here between the two neighbors.
What about this area here along this line? Can you see that? I just drew it with green there a little bit. The eastern line. I think it's the eastern line.
I didn't see that. Oh, this right here?
Yeah, along here.
You just
yeah, exactly.
Well, and this is probably about 100 feet. This is our grading limit line. We're going to leave it natural. We're not even going in there. I mean, if it does open up, it's not a fully it's a wooded area. There's places where there's trees, and there's some areas where it's not bare ground. It's underbrush and that kind of thing. But we were just going to leave that natural there. Again, this is the adjacent lot, and this is the extent of his yard here. So this area here is pretty much natural anyway.
Yeah, I would, just as an observation for board members, I would strongly urge us to consider very tight and rigid clearing and grading limit lines on these lots. These things are behaving as flag lots. They incur into other people's property and loom over it. So I think whatever we see from these applicants, and perhaps even on the prior applicant, we really need to carefully look at these clearing and grading limit lines.
I don't understand why this is a flag lot, Bob.
It's not a flag lot, but it behaves as such to the extent that you have this entire piece sitting in someone's, right behind someone's house and yard.
Well,
it is not a flag lot. It is not. I'm just saying it performs to a certain extent. Performs as such. This one less than the last one, but it still has that feeling.
Yeah, but if you look at lot 26 and you head towards Cowden, well, then there's another open space there that is a separate lot. Mm-hmm. So it isn't. The intrusion is relative, particularly with the septic fields being there. It's you're going to take down some trees, but some will have to be planted. But I don't. I guess I have to do a site visit for this.
And I think that it's going to be important for us I think it's important for us to lay this out for applicants now so that they understand, and we have demarcations and they're recorded so that people are on notice that some of these areas are just not suitable for development because of the impact to neighbors. Just
So,
my observation.
if Bob, if I understand you, we all agree it's not a flag light lot, and it could
Right.
behave as one if the portion of the lot that wraps around the back of somebody else's property is cleared and put to some use. And that particular condition on the previous application was highlighted by a neighbor who said they didn't want clearing on the lot behind their house, which is essentially, I think, what you're speaking of. Is that right, Bob?
Exactly right. Yep, thank you.
But that house, that person that said something, they live on Cowden, right?
No, next door, same street, Heathcote.
Oh, Heathcote. So it is, okay, so the wraparound's a serious issue.
Yeah.
I have another question, Jerry. On up near Bedford Road, there's a creek noted with a couple of two ponds, and I can't figure out from this because I don't have the contours in my head here. I'm assuming that the water flows. Let me think now. It goes there. Yeah, I'm not sure which way it goes. I think it goes to the
There's a high point right,
Petersville.
High point right here on the property, and it goes like this.
Yeah, down and to the left.
Down to the wetland like that, and then that wetland goes in, and it doesn't go into the pond. It actually bypasses the pond and then goes underneath and out. I know Alan can talk to that better than me because he's done the whole drainage study, but this wetland is adjacent to this pond, but this water does not get into that pond. In fact, it bypasses and crosses the street through this culvert system.
Right, and then Alan's here. And then what it does after that is it flows into the outlet stream from that pond.
Right.
But it doesn't go directly into that pond.
Yeah, you could actually see the drainage way from the tip of the arrow going straight down. It looks like that's where it drains.
No, that's good.
And it's actually on the in the SWIP report. It's in the flow path that's shown there because it is something I studied pretty carefully.
So,
okay, then where does the water go? Does it continue towards the lower left-hand corner, or does it go?
Yes.
Do you see where
from the pond? What it does is it flows eastward. You know, it looks to the bottom of the sheet, if you will.
Right. Do you see where the one is? I think that's where the water goes under Heathcote. The yellow, that yellow circle, which is actually an indicator for a photograph on Heathcote.
It's actually further to the left.
It's over.
That's it right there.
Yeah, it's over in this area here.
Actually, slightly to the right. Those culverts.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
So that's actually where it goes.
So, Dick, if you look at the top of the sheet, you can see the contour lines colliding. That's where we talked before about the ridge line of Cowden Lane.
Mm-hmm.
And then on their back lots, it's a slope that comes down and then levels out into these lots. And
Okay.
I've seen where Jerry's talking about drawing his arrows, that's where this water collects and then drains during a storm event.
Can you repeat that last comment? I'm just a little.
Oh,
sorry about that.
The water that is indicated, the drainage paths is indicated that are indicated by the red arrows. Are those drainage paths the consequence of water coming off the slope of Cowden Lane down to the flat area and then working their way to the left and the right?
Yes, it's one of the sources of it. That is correct.
Is there any other source of water there? Is there any other spring or any other source of water?
It was not really evident that there is any other source of water. It looks like it's just the sheet flow off of the hill slope.
Got it.
All right. So there's a ridge that goes. Let's see here where the arrow is. North. It goes across the north-south sort of. And then the water flows to the left and the water flows to the right, which is good because that's a good place to have the septic, I think. Yeah, so good. That answers my question.
So I'm going to, oh boy, I got to get out of this thing again. How do I do that again?
So Jerry, you were finished? Were you finished with Sabrina's memo, reviewing any points?
I think we're done with that, and I think I'd ask Alan to maybe talk a little bit about Bob's memo, if that's okay.
Well, before we do, Sabrina, do you have any other comments to make in connection with your memo and Jerry's comments on your memo?
No, I think that Jerry highlighted all my comments adequately. The question is whether or not the board agrees with his comments and, you know, or agrees with his responses to my comments.
Right. Well, I mean, specifically, you know, I think he's trying to find some more impervious surface, you know, reduce the impervious surfaces and reduce the home. We have to talk about about the setback, you know, as you pointed out, and Jerry's talked about it. So yeah, exactly right. So I guess we'll leave that.
So, and I will say, I will say they provided the alternative plan. I'm definitely in support of the alternative plan.
For the septic.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Very good. Yep. Thank
Jerry, have borings been made in both, you know, the primary and secondary septic areas to make sure the soils are good enough?
Yes, they have.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Jerry, was there any reasoning that Michael had the fields flip-flopped?
Yeah.
And I mean, your solution seems logical. I don't know why he went the other way. Was there a reason for that?
Well, that was an interesting conversation because I had the same question. And the answer was when the health department came out, apparently you have to have so many holes in a certain area to qualify. And he had that many holes in the back, but he didn't have it in the front. So he just said, well, we got the holes here, so we'll go with that. But when it came up that the board was concerned, well, you know, do we have to build this whole thing or all that? And I went back to Michael. He said, well, we'll have to do some more holes. So I said, so go ahead and do some more holes and have them back out there. And they did. And so that's what they did. They had them back out there and they dug a couple more holes.
Great. Okay,
so now they have the required number of holes in both areas.
Oh, better. Thank you.
Good.
Do you want to run through, Bob, do you want to run through your memo? Or just the highlights? I see a number of things have been complied with, but maybe we look at the ones that have not been completed satisfactorily.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'll start off. Go through the ones that haven't been done, which are scrolling up on my computer in front of me. ST3 is still incomplete. They have to get more test pits out there because of the increased stormwater. ST4 is incomplete too. Basically, it's because of the increased stormwater amount. ST5 is a standard. It's incomplete because you really can't get that until such time the planning board approves everything on the stormwater, and then I sign off on the NOI. So that's academic why it's incomplete. GC1 is incomplete. I'd recommend that they have more of a detailed maintenance schedule, which is more specific for each SMP on the site plan as opposed to generic for just the erosion controls, and incorporate that on the plan and in the stormwater report as well. GT2 is good. GT3 is having to do with the freestanding walls and retaining walls, and they should be submitted and prepared by a stamped New York State licensed professional engineer. GC4, evidently they're changing the type of design on the wall. They're not going to have a parapet wall. They're just going to have a 6-inch curb. With that being said, they still need to have fully drawn engineering plans prepared by a PE due to the surcharge on the driveway. GC5 is just some minor comments I have with the profile. GC6 is a standard. They have to get a street opening permit for the new work on the roadway. They didn't submit a preliminary subdivision plat based on the comments we had made last time. So those are still outstanding. That's SP1 down to SP4. And then I have new comments based on the submittal. And basically, I'll just highlight the ones that I think are important. NC3, there's quite a bit of disturbance for the driveway installation. It's about 327-foot run. It's a steep slope. It's right by the drive. They have to bring in some fill. There's a retaining wall by the driveway. I would recommend to the board that this be a special condition being there and applied to the building permit as well, where basically the driveway, the retaining wall, and the stormwater has to be completely stabilized before they start on the foundation of the house. Because in my experience, most contractors want to do the house right away and not really do the stormwater and the driveway until later in the project duration. And that creates problems with erosion. So I'd recommend that be done first. And they submit a very clear and concise construction sequencing plan so the board can see it and we can all decide on it and agree to it and put it in the resolution as well. NC 4, 5, and 6 are just basically, actually 4 and 5 are basically just some tables I'd like to see to clarify what Alan had done. NC 6 and NC 7 and NC 8, basically because of the extensive nature of the stormwater facilities on this site with all the drain inlets, the outlet control structure, the extensive stormwater facilities, I would recommend, even though it's technically not in Chapter 108A, that they do provide a performance guarantee and a maintenance guarantee and an inspection fee on this to perform all the inspections on the stormwater because of its extensive nature. That's NC 6, 7, and 8. NC 9 additional test pits should be done because of the area for the stormwater. I think it's like 2,500 square feet. And also to the stormwater report done by Alan should show the limits of disturbance, and basically 11 and 12 are just some details regarding the areas, and NC 14 is general notes we like to see on the structural plans. NC 15 are general notes we like to see on the site plans as well. It just covers all the bases regarding inspections for the stormwater and the dry wells and the retaining walls and as-built that are required for the stormwater facilities. And that ends my review comments for this application.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Dennis, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Well,
a little bit similar, huh?
Obviously, when I was walking lot 27, some of what I was observing there, some of that spilled over into lot 26, and at the time I wasn't thinking much of it until I received the Tabalachi site wetland investigation completed by Mr. Janig and saw that he had sort of viewed the area as like a single comprehensive investigation. So I just kind of was put in a position whereby I'm making these comments onto lot 27. Noticed some of the carryover of similar features and observations onto lot 26. So I just made the same recommendation that it would be nice during the hydrology season to, conduct a wetlands investigation to see if we come to the same conclusions that were done in the fall of 2016.
Right.
Yeah, I think that given that the place where the septic fields are planned to be built is 2 feet higher than the rest of the terrain and represents a north-south ridge as opposed to a east-west gully. I think that that's good. I think one factor, if we find a wetland on 23 Heathcote, then where does the buffer zone go? But we've often put septic fields in buffers where needed. So I think it's good to do, but I think we'll find that it's a better set of circumstances here.
Yeah, I had a chance to discuss a little bit of this with Mr. Corelli today, and we're certainly willing to to, look into this thing and work with the neighbor to the north and, try to get this resolved to everyone's satisfaction.
Great.
Is it possible, Jerry, that you could actually coordinate these delineations with your neighbor to the north, and perhaps it'll be more time efficient, maybe more cost effective for the two of you as well, and move it forward?
Yeah, in fact, Brad Schwartz had put a call together with Peter Gregory, the applicant's engineer, and myself, and we had this very conversation. So we're trying to coordinate that right now.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, there's a comment from the same neighbor from before in the chat window here.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see it.
It raises a question about the deed restrictions historically here, and it's a legitimate question.
Yep. I can't seem to pick it up, but do you see it there? Oh, wait a second. Here we are. Well, Clinton, those deed restrictions, are those a matter of enforcement for the town, or are those deed restrictions that are private?
I don't know. I haven't seen the deeds, so I don't know how the restrictions are phrased. Typically, if they're from the digest period, they are probably private as opposed to public, meaning it would run to adjoining property owners as opposed to the town as a public entity.
Right.
But that's, that's without, I make that statement without any real firsthand knowledge because I haven't seen the deeds.
Right. So I guess that would be something that we should ask the applicant to research and provide to us.
Yes.
And I think it's a very good point. Thanks, Eldad. I didn't see that chat pop up. But that's a very important issue, so we should really look at that.
There's actually another comment just showed up there too, by the way.
Yeah, I see that. Yep. Yep. This is, I think these properties have been here a long time, and these subdivisions have been here for some time. And of course, the applications for these subdivisions have been around for some time. I think, notwithstanding the deed restrictions, there are some really good reasons why this buffer was left undeveloped and why these lots were drawn this way in order to limit development on these properties. So I think it's something that we really need to look at carefully before we start pulling back buildings and going into these areas. It sounds on paper, oh, it's just a simple lot line change, but I think these lot line changes could have ramifications to neighbors, and we're hearing that now yet from another neighbor who's concerned that by pushing that house, the same proposed house, back further into the lot, could fall well within the site of her property over on Cowden. So these are important issues to look at. We really need to see, Jerry, on your properties, the locations of neighbor homes and the distances, so we have a better understanding of how far these things sit to your proposed location.
So, Bob, I'd like to comment on that as well. It's probably, I don't know why I didn't catch this sooner, but the location of the house, I think, is actually a pretty big problem. The reason, and I think that Jerry made the statement that having the house pulled back, made the observation, having the house pulled back sort of opened up the road and less, I forget, forgive me, Jerry, the precise term you used, but more interesting or less boring or less rigid. I forget exactly what the term was. But there is a reason why in subdivision developments, all homes essentially fall in line with each other. And it's not just because that's the nature of the setbacks, although the setback sets that line at a certain point. It has to do with the division, and this is really, it may sound nuanced, but it's really very important. It has to do with the division between public and private space. And the street is public space. I don't want to go into a dissertation about this, but because I'll even bore myself. But the street is public space, and the front yard in our culture, in our society, it's known as sort of public-private space. It's owned by somebody else, but it's visible to the public. So it's sort of shared in that sense. Once you get through deeper into the property, you get inside the house, and that's totally private. And the backyard spaces are supposed to be private also. And there's a reason why you don't see subdivision developments with staggered houses. It's because when you have the houses set back, they have a view of the private space behind the house of the neighbor. And that's a problem. I mean, that makes that house that has lost its private space in the back of the house, that lot, it makes it less valuable, and it makes it a problem to sell, and rightfully so. So this house is located back, and it's located in a position that can look into the neighbor's backyard. And I think that the neighbor would have a legitimate reason to be concerned about that.
Could that be ameliorated by planting trees and shrubs at the back end?
Well, it could be. Yes, it could be, Dick. Absolutely, it could be. But that would have to be something that I think we would, in my opinion, that would be something that we'd have to be certain was done properly and fully, if we are to protect this the private space in the neighbor's backyard. And I actually think that the house ought to be pulled forward and ought to be put in line with the other houses. I think that would actually be better, because it would pull, I don't know what the soil conditions are where the house sits now on the plan, but that could pull the septic system back forward again and cause even less clearing in that area, which is of everybody's concern at this point. We're sort of wondering I think we're wondering whether that's the most appropriate use for the zone back there, or at least it's one of the questions that we should ask. So I think that it's not, I actually think that the site plan is really, I don't want to say poorly designed, but I think that it's not really planned in recognition of some of the other issues that I think ought to apply here.
Well, if I can respond to that, I think that, in earlier discussions, there was concern that, it was a large house, albeit it's a zoning compliant house, but that by moving it back a little bit, it gave us the opportunity to set it back off the road a little bit farther, to decrease the visual size of the house. It also gives us the opportunity to do a lot of planting, and we do have a lot of planting to do. Not to say that we don't have wiggle room, that we couldn't move it forward, but we do have to recognize that the stormwater management area is really soil specific, and Alan did a lot of work, and this is the area that he's said will work. And then, of course, I do have this transition slope right here that we do have to get up. We are higher up on the plateau, so I do need a little bit of room. That's not to say that we can't cut that slope in half and maybe use a little bit of a wall. That's not to say we can't redo this. So I mean, I think there is some flexibility, but I think to suggest that we put the house in this location, if you just project this over, you can see how that could be problematic. We'd be right on top of the stormwater area. We'd be right on top of the slope. So I don't, every lot is different and every lot is unique. And I think we have to work with what we have the best we can. And, we're certainly willing to look at it and see if we can, ameliorate that with some changes to recognize that point.
But Jerry, fair enough. But at the same time, I'm guessing that it's possible that the features you just discussed about the stormwater infiltration area. I mean, all these location decisions on the plan are actually probably driven by the location of the house. And if you relocated the house, you might very well end up with some downstream decisions that actually, made it work. If the lot was, a standard size lot and you weren't asking to, or an existing lot, you weren't asking for a lot line change, I'm certain you get a house to work on this lot.
Well, you're going to have a 5-foot drop in terrain at least, if not 10, if you move the house down to be parallel with the other house. And so that means the septic field, which is back up there, if that's where you have to have it, then you're going to have to pump it up, which I don't really feel comfortable with normally.
We approve that all the time, though. I mean, we just did that.
I know we do, but I don't feel comfortable with it. I mean, I'd rather have it by gravity because, you know, then it's just one less mechanical thing that doesn't have to fail. You don't have to worry if it fails.
Well,
it's by gravity.
To me, the larger issue is the position of the house. Dealing with either having a force main to get up to a septic system or not is, I mean, it's engineering, and I understand that there are some costs associated with that, but I think the lot ought to be developed, designed and developed appropriately. Now, it's also possible, Dick, you raised the question about whether, well, can we just go ahead and, we are where we are on this application, can we just go ahead and screen that, what is it, the northeastern?
Yeah, northeast, right.
Just really heavily screen that to be sure that privacy is secured, and it probably is appropriate to hope that that neighbor will, you know, appear in this process in order to get, you know, their input on that.
Well, and I think that it will also help the Singhs, and that they'll have privacy from the other neighbors, you know, that have the issue. So it'll be, you know, good for both. Secondly, you know, we need to have photographs. We need a site visit. We need to have photographs of what it's going to look like, if best we can, or what it looks like now, so we can see how many trees are being taken out, you know, for the septic field. That's why, you know, it's good to have some trees left, you know, by building just part of the field to begin with, which will maintain the privacy of both neighbors much better.
Well, notwithstanding the engineering issue of a pump system, moving the house to the front will also probably reduce the amount of impact from building the septic fields. Because again, that field could be built closer to the home, that could be closer to the street, and even the expansion area, if we have to build it, there might be less impact. So it's interesting to look at in terms of what it could save for trees and other impacts up there. And again, depending upon what Dennis finds with the wetland, if any wetland or if any buffer, that might direct us differently as well. So the applicant at this point not to be, until we really get the information on this wetland situation, I think we really need to look at get that information before we get too much further down the road on this. That's an important issue, threshold issue.
Another threshold issue is this deed restriction question, right? I mean, the question was raised: is it even permitted to have a house built on what was originally the back lot? And so, if it's not permitted, then that kind of answers that question. The house has to be pulled forward. But Tom, first of all, I'll say that I certainly appreciate the dissertation on subdivision and setbacks and all that. But that's just me. But the point is, I think that the question is really the location of the house, and everything else is, to me anyway, somewhat secondary. You know, there is the let me annotate here. There is the indication of the distance between the residence to the north up the street and the distance to the original house, well, the house as originally designed, and then the proposed residence as it is. And it was closer, it looks like it's about 8 feet closer as originally designed, and now it's pushed back. And so there is a trade-off there, right? That distance versus angle. Right, if it was pulled even closer to the street, it would be closer to the house, but the angle would be a sharper angle. But it seems to me, and maybe I'll be saying this every meeting, that there is, you know, there is a way to make everyone happy or everyone a little unhappy here, which is, you know, I think Dick's point of screening, but I think there are a couple of threshold questions here, right? The location. You know, the legality of the location of the house, existence and extent of the wetland, and then concerns. I think, I don't know how the board has dealt with this in the past, but some kind of understanding of impact on views from existing adjacent properties or existing adjacent homes, that is to say, would be helpful also in this case.
Jerry, a quick question. Can you just, is the original house the one that's kind of in the driveway?
That's this one right here. Can you see that?
That was the original. And do you know what the distance was from that closest corner to the existing residence to the right?
Well, look, we got 135 here.
About 175, I was guessing?
Probably.
Okay.
But again, we're fighting this line right here. We've got.
I see. Yeah, I definitely see that line there.
Got to keep that. We want to stay out of that 100-foot wetland buffer.
Mhm.
This is the location of the Tabo house that the board had previously looked at.
Right.
Right in here. I'd just like to respond to a couple of points that the board members made. In addition to this very dense hedgerow that we're proposing in here, we're also proposing a solid 6-foot height solid fence that we would stain forest green. I've done this many times on projects. When you take a fence and you stain it forest green and you bury it in landscape hedgerow type things, it's a very effective buffer to the neighbors. It provides everybody a lot of privacy, and the fence just disappears into the green. In terms of where our house is, this is where we have the house proposed. So you can see what's unique, I think, about this property is you can see that we're here. This is all undeveloped all the way around it. It's undeveloped in front of it. It's undeveloped behind it. It's undeveloped, and it's probably going to remain that way. So that's why we thought we had a pretty good location that we wouldn't be impacting anybody. And it's part of the reason why we picked those locations and to try to make that work. And we were conscious of trying to push it back a little bit because we knew there were some neighboring concerns about, well, it's a large house. And we said, well, what if we pushed it back a little bit? And what if we got some more landscaping and we really planted it up and tried to soften that up? And just the last point I'd like to make is, I know it's come up several times about, what's going on? What are the restrictions for these, what I call the Reader Digest lots? And this came up at the zoning board meeting, our first zoning board meeting that we ended up coming away from. And the neighbor to the left on this side, he produced, I think, what was called a codicil that talked about what could be done and what couldn't be done. And the gist of it seemed to be, and I'm not an attorney, the gist of it seemed to be that if there's going to be development in these areas, it has to be zoning compliant. And that was another reason why Brad Schwartz had suggested to us, he said, look, you got to be zoning compliant. So you want to work in there, make your house zoning compliant. I think that at that time from the zoning board attorney was asked to provide whatever you call it, a brief, a summary of what that codicil meant. And I think that we have to ask our attorney, Mr. Schwartz, to also look at that and see what that says. So that's something we could report back to the board on and take that, to clarify that a little bit. But that was my recommendation.
I think that's a very interesting point, Jerry. And, this building is not zoning compliant unless there's a lot line merger. So it's very interesting because it seems to me that deed restriction has operated with all the other houses to keep them closer to the street and keep them on those original lots and to keep that back area, whatever that might be, that wild area, undisturbed. So it seems to me, while we may have a legal document, it's very, very interesting to see what we think and what the zoning board thinks and what the applicant thinks was really the intention of having that restriction. My guess is that it was set up so that those front lots would have to comply with zoning as front lots. And that's why the homes are a certain size. And again, you're talking about, and Sabrina's memo, of course, confirms that the house and the development is zoning compliant, provided there is a merger of the two lots. So it's a combination of the comment and observation that we've had from the member of the public, from Eldad's observation and concerns. This is not just, I think, a codicil or a legal document that sits out by itself, but it'll be interesting to understand, from my standpoint anyway, how it performs and how it was intended to perform. My guess is it was intended to do exactly what it has done prior to these last two applications, and that was limit development to those lots that are directly on Heathcote and not have this very strange configuration behind these lots where we have these encroachments behind other people's lots. Just my thought.
Yeah, I leave it to the lawyers to figure out the difference between the, you know, the letter of the codicil and the intent. I mean, that's going to be something that you know, somebody, you know, might have some discussions over. It might be true if you go back and look at, just for the sake of discussion here, if you go back and look at the overall parcel plan of the neighborhood, it might be true that those interior lots, it might be true that that was set up so that perhaps you could get a cul-de-sac in there. You know, you get a few more lots in that area. And it just never happened for whatever reason. I mean, it's hard unless there is some documentation about that in particular. These lots seem to be very, very strange to me. I mean, I don't understand why they were created this way other than for that purpose.
Yep.
Who pays taxes on those lots?
Sorry? What?
The back lots, does anyone pay taxes on them?
Sure, property owners should be paying.
So the property owner is the same owner that owns the lot along Heathcote.
Folks, they are owned by the people who own they are referenced in deeds for the people who own the houses along Heathcote.
Right.
Okay. So if you're paying taxes, then there's another question.
Taxes.
What are you paying taxes for if you can't use the property?
You're paying taxes for land.
You're paying at a very reduced rate, thanks. For
of course, I understand that.
Piece of property.
The tax issue, they're paying for vacant land.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I would point out
and
that
you know,
go ahead, Sabrina. Sorry.
No, what I was going to say is, as the previous discussion, whatever improvements are made on those properties will be assessed accordingly.
Yeah.
So the tax issue, it's either taxed as it is today or in a different configuration tomorrow.
And one of the reasons that it may be true, one of the reasons people bought property on Cowden Lane and bought the lots behind them was to protect themselves to have that back there as an amenity, protect themselves from other development, not have to look into anybody else's backyard.
Yep.
That's a good point.
I can't imagine it would be anything other than a Tom. And I think that was my guess is that's what the intent was, but we'll see.
Yeah. I will get Clinton.
Causes difficulties for me on this whole issue of the lot line adjustments. So I'll leave that to Clinton and Sabrina and the lawyers, but I think the lot line changes here are very unusual. We don't normally see this. The lot line changes here carry fairly significant impacts. Now, we looked at the Tavolachi one before, so I think we've already looked at it and approved it. So certainly that's already been done, and the lot line change is probably in order. But we need to be careful on this. And anyway, those are my thoughts.
If I may, for the board, the lot line change when the Tavolachi's house was here. Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was further closer to the street.
It was this red line right here. See this red line?
Not yet.
Yeah,
right. So that is still we have the same discussion over the placement of the house and its proximity to the road.
This was where the Tavolachi house was.
Right.
Yeah, which is, yeah.
So it was mostly on the original lot.
Totally.
I think it was completely on the original lot.
Yeah, so this is a big change, and I think there are ramifications to this lot line change that need to be looked at very carefully. And again, I would urge the applicant at this point, rather than just spending a lot of time here, we need to get the wetland information. That is critically important. I think we need to get some information about this deed, alleged deed restrictions, see if it's public, private, what the and perhaps investigate the history of it, and look at it there. I'm very concerned with the way these lots will perform by potentially incurring and on these other lots that are on that front on Heathcote.
On the Tabalachi proposal, where was the septic field?
Same place.
I'm sorry?
Same place.
Same place?
Yep.
Okay.
So did we approve a lot line change with the Tabalachi application?
Yes.
So why is it before us again? Isn't it already merged into one lot?
Because it was felt, Sabrina, maybe you can help clarify, but I thought it was.
It expired.
Okay.
What expired?
What expired? The application?
The subdivision, the preliminary, it was a preliminary subdivision. And they didn't file what they needed to file. It was many, many months. If you recall, Lester Steinman, they came in after the expiration, and Lester Steinman said, you know, we would have to go back and do preliminary and final. We can combine them into one. At your last meeting, you guys actually reconfirmed the negative declaration under SECRA at your last meeting. So this is a follow-up. So we were kind of... we're doing the two processes in a combined fashion.
I would add just that the clarification on the proposed fence and the planting is helpful to me. It would be good if there was additional visuals associated with that, but the clarification was very helpful. Certainly sensitive to concerns from the neighbor, especially given the pushing back of the house. But we also want to be reasonable here. And it seems like go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eldon, didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah, the fence, I agree. The hedge, which is being planted, looks like an evergreen hedge. I haven't looked up the species, but I'm sure it's fine. Knowing Jerry, but again, this is a two-story building, and there's a bedroom window on the second floor that looks into the side yard. So I would be looking for a little bit more robust, taller screening, which, you know, we've required before on other projects, and I'm sure that could be achieved here. But the other thing that I was going to say, if the Tabalachi application was not approved, but it was well on its way, I guess. And the location of the house on the Tabalachi application, if that's the red line, and the location of the septic field is where it is on the proposed plan now, there's not enough difference between those two things to warrant, I don't think, to warrant us saying, well, wait a minute, we got to make some big changes here. Because moving the house a little bit further forward to sort of come closer to the location that we were close to approving, I guess, back then, I don't think that's going to make a substantial difference in the overall development of the property.
So if I could just quickly chime in. Good evening, everybody. I did get called to this meeting late in the day, but I have been listening closely. So look, we will get back to the board on all these topics, including the deed restriction. Clinton and I will get you that information, and we'll communicate about that and ultimately report back to the full board on that issue. So appreciate everybody's comments. Just wanted to say hello. I've been listening, and we'll report back accordingly.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a little bit difficult because obviously the applicant knows the history, right? And the applicant moved forward based on that history. And it seems to me we're pretty close to what that history represents. And I'm not sure it would be right, unless something else occurs that we don't know about yet. It would be right to turn this thing upside down and start over.
I agree with that.
I agree with that, but with the caveat that we don't have that information. So again, right. If the wetland determination is such that we discover that we have a wetland or a buffer issue, then we have to consider that as well.
Right. Of course.
So at this point, I guess what we should do is look to the applicant to provide us with some of this information, some of these answers, and look for a submission with these this information. And maybe some of this is just going to be narrative without necessarily new plans, and just to fill us in on it.
Got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
For June 2nd, Bob, or?
I think we'll leave that to staff and Sabrina to see what we get and when we get it. If Brad, if you think that your team can have things ready in a couple of weeks, I mean, June 2nd, I think is pretty tight in terms of submission.
May 11th.
Yeah, it's
May
26
11th
days.
is the submission deadline for June 2nd. But, you know, I do want to say, you know, and it's up to the board, if the applicant can get the information relatively quickly and distribute the plan, you know, the information electronically to everybody, you know, maybe we can do it. You know, Brad, I would say if the planning board is willing, and let's say you can do it, there's no way I don't know, tomorrow, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, how quickly do you guys think you can pull this information together? I mean, Jerry, you had mentioned that you did some of this work for the zoning board. You know, so maybe May 11th isn't too unrealistic.
No, I do think, unfortunately, I think that's unrealistic. I think we need to give Brad a little chance to get back up to speed. We just pulled him back in today.
Okay.
Want to coordinate with Peter Gregory and his team with the delineation. So we got a lot of moving parts. I mean, we want to get it done as soon as we can, because I know Dr. Singh is anxious to move along. But
Right.
I think we want to be careful, and we want to make sure we do everything right.
How about the
So
June
then May
17th?
26th is the deadline for the June 17th meeting.
Which is a Wednesday.
And for July 7th, yeah, it is a Wednesday meeting. And then July 7th, the deadline would be June 15th for information. So those are the two after the next one.
Sabrina, what was the first one? I heard June 15th. The first one was May what?
The
June
June 2nd is May 11th, which we didn't think would be appropriate. The
Right.
next was the June 17th meeting, which is a Wednesday night. The deadline for submission of material is May 26th.
Got it. Okay, that should be doable.
And then, okay, yeah. And then
All right, good.
it's fine. And again, not knowing what kind of situation we'll be in by the end of May, I would suggest that electronic copies, if you can get hard copies produced, then, you know, we can have them mailed to different people. And because we do have staff in the office, so just be in communication with me, if you will, as far as distribution of your information.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, nice to see you all.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay.
Be
we
well,
move now
Dr.
to-
Singh.
Bye, Sabrina. Thank you.
We move now to our next item. This is a request for an extension of approval for the Chappaqua Central School District. Request for extension to submit the final subdivision plot, Button Hook Road, Sabina Road. Staff, any issues, questions, or problems with the request?
Thank you, Clinton.
Thank you. Bob, I'm leaving now.
Bye.
Oh, okay. Jennifer's back in. Take care, Clinton. Yep.
Jen's here.
See you, Clinton.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, I'm back for the really exciting stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Take it away.
Brad, you're still here.
I'm sticking around.
Yep.
Really is like a talk show.
No, it's kind of like, what was the movie? I forget, well, not the movie, the game show where you have the different squares of people sitting there.
Hollywood Square.
Hollywood Square, yes.
Yep.
I'm dating myself.
Yes. Anyone have any issues with the extension for this school district?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
If not, is there a motion to grant the extension that's been requested?
So
By the way,
moved.
I guess it's retroactive, right? We have to go back to March 6th to make this effective, right? And it goes to March 5,
Yes.
2021. Again, I don't think it is terribly relevant. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Or do we have to do a roll call on this too?
Dick
Yes.
says aye.
Dick, aye. Greg,
Aye.
Eldad,
Aye.
and Tom.
Why am I always last?
I'm last. You're
Aye.
second to last. I'm aye. Okay, 5-0. Great. Tight vote. Okay, the next item is the extension for Lamini. This is a request for an extension to obtain a filling and grading permit, 402 Starl Street. I actually have a problem with this one, only because they're
Yeah.
asking for a full year, and this thing has been dragging on now for years. I don't see, Brad, you're still here. Okay, good. Brad, I know that we have the situation, with the emergency at this point, but landscapers are out working at this time, and even 3 months from now, we should know what's really going on and whether or not you've made the cut on this. I know you also have some problems, obviously, with the unfortunate passing of Barry, but and you probably have to regroup on that. But I just don't see a year on this. I could see 3 months or 6 months, but you guys have just got to get this thing going. I know you have problems with DEP, but it's been dragging now for years.
I agree. Just to amplify Bob's point, the season to do this is upon us.
Right.
And why wait for the next year's season to be upon us? It doesn't make sense to me.
Landscapers are out there now.
So I appreciate the comments, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brownell. So one of the current restrictions related to COVID, there was a prohibition on new landscaping. The only landscaping that has been permitted is deemed routine maintenance. And I could speak just even anecdotally, my own landscapers here don't even like that. They're coming out like twice a month now because they're not happy sending their crews out even for the routine maintenance. So there is currently a restriction on new construction as well as new landscaping. There's also the practical matter. Even if the new landscaping restriction was to be lifted in a month or 2 or 3, the amount of plantings that are necessary for this mitigation plan would have had to been ordered already. And given the literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost for those plantings, our client couldn't take that risk going ahead, ordering all that planting. That even assumes the nurseries even have it in stock, which is even questionable. But we couldn't order all that planting, not knowing if and when the restriction would be lifted. So that's the practical difficulty with the landscaping component. Alan, who's still on the call here, is now quarterbacking the DEP process. We're close and we think we're going to get that SWIP approval, Alan, hopefully within a couple of weeks, and you could speak to that. I will point out that in my letter with the extension request, we are happy to sort of bifurcate the application. The landscaping, I think, unfortunately, we really are looking at next spring, but the roadway improvements in Sarl Street, once we get the DEP SWIP approval, and in light of the fact that road work is deemed essential construction, those improvements, our client is more than happy and willing to do this year. We would just need to work with Bob, Sabrina, and Jennifer in terms of isolating those conditions of approval that pertain to the road work. Let's get those taken care of so the road work can commence, and then we could deal with the landscaping next spring. So that's the request and the basis for the request.
Brad, what about the fall planting season? There are really 2 planting seasons each year, spring and fall.
Well, I knew I should have had Glenn and Seth on the call as well then. So I've been advised by them that the perennials in particular, now is the time that the fall season is not appropriate for many of the perennial plantings that were proposed as part of the plan. And then we also get into the issue of, are they in stock? When would we need to order them and so forth?
Right, and it's really a time, Alan, here, it really is a timing issue. Perennials have to be planted in the spring, and the fall's not an appropriate time at all. And that's what led to that.
Okay, well, I think going ahead with the road makes good sense. I think that we should review this not a year from now, but 6 months from now. So with the idea that if all the restrictions stay in effect, that we may even have to go a year from 6 months from now.
Yep. I would support that.
And what Brad says about the planting is very true. You can't get landscapers to do half the stuff you want them to do because they're afraid to go out and work.
Yeah,
I've
Not
come,
unless you live in
I've come across
Connecticut.
that in 3 projects.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I can tell you firsthand, it's not happening.
Right, and there's limitations on construction, the number of personnel you can have on any site at a given time. So all that is
Yeah,
combined to make it very difficult for new projects.
Absolutely.
One more quick housekeeping item. I know the agenda specifically mentions the filling and grading permit. The tree removal permit is also slated to expire May of this year. So just in terms of the resolution of whatever vote you're about to take, if you can please incorporate the extensions of both approval.
But we don't have jurisdiction of the tree permit. That's the environmental coordinators purview.
It was in the planning board, it was in your resolution.
Why would that be?
That
we
was
have
included in
jurisdiction over the
the
steep slope zoning.
Usually.
Jen, can you repeat that?
I said, yeah, it was included in the planning board's resolution.
Right.
Yes.
If you want me to comment, I think part of the reason that we did include that is because there is a tree removal window, because we just wanted to be sort of sensitive to the Indiana and northern long-eared bat. So it's interesting, I guess, Mr. Schwartz, that you're bringing up that it's going to expire within that window where you can't remove trees. So it almost like, if I'm using my Latin correctly, a fait accompli, that you have to renew it. This way you could perform those removals during the recommended window, which is obviously a late fall into winter period.
Je parle françois.
Well, I'm happy to include it. So, what's the what do we want to do here? Full year, 6 months? Personally, I would
You need
go
to
for
do a
6
year.
months, but
I think with the planting schedule and everything that needs to be done, I think they're going to need in a year.
Well, I'd like to have a communication in 6 months. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't give them the 12 months, but I would like to have a status update in 6 months.
And I would say, Mr. Brownell, I would say no later than 6 months, because if we get DEP approval a month or two from now, we may be back to you sooner. So if we can get the extension for a year, that would be much appreciated. And then we will come back to you once we get the DEP approval and not later than 6 months.
that sounds fine.
And that will be written into the extension, Brad.
That's fine.
Okay.
And Sabrina and Bob, if we can start working with you now, then looking ahead to the road work, and let's check off a couple of conditions that pertain to the road, and let's start submitting to you what we need to get those reviewed and approved.
Terrific. Okay, thank you very much, Brett.
Submit away, Brad.
Good night, everybody.
So, as amended, is there a motion to grant the approval?
Motion.
So move. Second.
Roll call.
All right, Tom?
Yes.
Whoa.
Sorry, who moved? Who moved? I didn't hear that.
Oh, Greg moved,
Okay,
and
Thank
Dick
you.
seconded.
Yes,
thank you.
and Tom was voting first.
Noted.
He said
Having
aye?
trouble.
Greg?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Eldad?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so I think that's 5-0. So that's motion is carried and the extension granted. We have 2 referrals from the town board. One is for a proposal to Chapter 60, Section 410, subsection C2 of the code regarding eaves projecting onto neighboring yards. So it is really a very small, very slight change. I think just basically eaves is deleted from the language of the law.
So can somebody explain to me why we're doing this?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because if a bay window can project and an eave can't, that's a wacky house you're gonna have.
Eave is considered classified as an architectural element. And so the language after eaves or other architectural element.
So can I just chime in, because can I just chime in? I've had some internal conversations today actually about this local law, because the way it's drafted actually doesn't meet the intent of what the town board is trying to do here, as I understand. So the way it's drafted, it would take eaves out of the exception for the projections. Right now, you have a setback, right? You're supposed to keep that setback clear of projections, except for those things that are listed in this provision: chimneys, cornices, windowsills, bay windows, and eaves. But there's a limitation on how far those things are allowed to project into the setback, and that's no more than 3 feet, or in the aggregate, they can't occupy more than a quarter of the length of the wall on which they're located. So by just taking eaves out of this exception altogether, you're actually saying that eaves have to comply with the setback requirements, which is not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is to say that eaves aren't subject to that 3-foot limitation and aren't subject to that quarter of the length of the wall limitation either. So the way it has been referred to you actually doesn't meet the intent of what the town's trying to do here.
Jennifer, are you saying then, Jennifer, that an eave could project 12 feet in?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the town
That
is.
seems
that's what
even worse.
That's
Why is
That's
the
a
town board
porch.
trying to write architectural code? It doesn't make sense.
No, what we need here, we need a definition of a extended porch, which the eave of 12 foot would
Jennifer,
become.
is there going to be a re-referral of a rewritten law?
Yeah.
That was an option, or what you can do is you can provide your comments on how you think that this should be revised to meet that intent. Just to kind of, cut to the chase of the process here.
I don't think it's clear what the intent is.
Yeah, what is the intent?
Yeah, what's driving this?
My understanding is that there have been a lot of applications that have gone to the Zoning Board of Appeals for just regular eaves projecting beyond 3 feet. Beyond the 3 feet that's allowed here in this exception. So you may have an eave projecting 3.5 feet into the setback. And those are required to then go to the zoning board to seek a setback variance. The building inspector is trying to eliminate all of those applications to the zoning board that typically get granted as a matter of course because they don't present any significant impacts.
So Jennifer, maybe it's excuse me, not just the length of the projection, but the length of the eave along the wall, because doesn't it say no more than a quarter of the length of the wall and eaves are going to project the whole length of the building. So maybe it's the length of the eave rather than the depth of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So both of those, I referenced that both of those limitations would not apply to eaves in what the town board is trying to achieve here. So they would be unrestricted with respect to their projection and unrestricted with respect to the amount of the length.
So the first thing you need then, I would need, and maybe it's already, it probably is already in the code, is a definition of an eave. But maybe it's not in the code with enough specificity to be sure that we don't end up somebody building a 12-foot eave and then parking a car under it.
Exactly. There has to be a maximum to it.
Right.
Well, there is now, but it's getting passed over.
No, there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're trying to eliminate it, right? So that it can project as much as you want to, right up to the property line.
Right.
Which doesn't seem right to me.
I think someone has to start over on it. I don't think it's our job to rewrite this.
Right, we're not going to write zoning, but it seems to me it's not. There are some holes.
I don't think you have enough I don't think you have enough information to comment on this referral.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree because
I do think rather than not say anything, I think a memo needs to be prepared from your board back to the town board on the referral, asking for more information, that the information provided the intent was not clear, and in order to comment fully, you need a rewrite.
Yep. Okay.
I think that's completely reasonable.
All right.
So, per the board's direction, my office can prepare a memo stating such, and we can run it by the chairman prior to circulation to the town board for you.
I always love that. That works for me. How about you, Bob?
Oh, yes. That's why the big bucks are made here. Yep, that's fine. If that's okay with everyone, we'll do it that way. Should be very quick.
Do we need a vote?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
You should.
For the authorization. So is there such a motion, authorize me to look at this and review it from staff?
Motion.
Second.
On, Tom, first.
Yes.
Dick?
Aye.
Yes.
Eldad?
Yes.
Yes. Greg?
Aye.
All right, that's 5. I'm aye. Okay, so we carried 5-0.
Yeah, keep in mind, Eldad has not been able to say yes, I don't think, first on anything. So keep that in mind for the next one.
I'm mindful of that.
Good, thank you.
It's very important. It's very important. Thank you. Thank you, Dick.
And the next item is a proposed change in the law dealing with walls, retaining walls. And this is probably one of those Scioli jobs, right? Because this stuff all has to go to engineers. And so I guess the intention here is to tighten up on these regulations. It's interesting to me that this still does not have any impact, for example, on the Chappaqua Crossing retaining wall, because that's internal. So these are sort of like the external walls that we're dealing with here.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that the any wall that doesn't exceed 4 feet in exposed retaining wall height, which is a term that's defined in this local law, would not be subject to the setback requirements. And then building permits for walls that are 24 inches or less wouldn't have to meet the same building permit the same typical building permit requirements. There's a lesser standard that those walls would have to meet.
Can I say one thing here, Jennifer?
Yeah, absolutely.
I did write an
Please,
extensive.
Bob.
I wrote an extensive memo to the board to actually Drew. If you want to read it, I can send it to you right now. I have it all set to go, guys. If you want to read it now.
Can you give a summary? Can you give a summary of what the change in the legislation is, so that the board can determine, how they want to respond to the referral?
I'm going to send it to them anyway, and they can take a look. I just sent it. Basically, we always had a lot of issues with retaining walls coming in. There was a lot of confusion between architects, engineers, people that just didn't know much about structural, about what's the height of a wall. And people would always say, well, it's only 4 feet. But in reality, when you're doing a design on a wall, which I had to do in college for 4 years, you use the bottom of the footing to the top of the retained height to the wall. So there was always a misconception that just because it's less than 4 feet retained height, it's not really a structural wall, but it really is, because when you do an analysis, you have to use the bottom of the footing to the top of the wall. And another thing that never came into mention that people didn't quite understand, and rightly so, they didn't study it in college, is that anytime you have any type of loading next to a wall, from a roadway, from a sloping backfill, from high groundwater table, you have surcharges. So, I mean, there's a lot of variables that affect the wall. So I wrote a memo to Drew, which I gave to Jill, and the board did receive, which pretty much set it straight. So basically, people are all on the same page now, hopefully, when they come in and they apply for a permit. And really, bottom line is, we're just making applicants that have a wall that exceeds the retained height, which is the existing grade on the front of the wall to the top, to need permits. So basically, that's where we had this written, just to clarify that, really. And then we actually put a definition in the code that clarifies it. So when people do come in and ask general questions about walls, it can be clearly understood what the parameters are between the retained height and the exposed retaining wall height. So basically, that's my memo in summary. If you'd like to read it, go ahead. It's a 4-page memo. So that's pretty much what I tried to articulate in my memo to the board.
Right, and we've dealt with this a lot, Bob, because of many, many times where the engineer has indicated, I don't have to get an engineering stamped plan on this, and you've indicated, no, you have 2 feet below surface. Yes, you do. So I remember seeing this many, many times because it's really part of the structure.
That is correct. So I think it's going to clarify things, and it just makes it a lot easier to explain to the people. And now, because it's legislated, they really have to oblige by it. And really, part of it I got out of the New York State Building Code. It's similar. They came to the same conclusion, so I used that as a fallback, which they have to be pretty good at what they're doing as well. And they did a lot of studies on it also. So basically, that's my memo in a nutshell.
Good, and the language in the law then is reflecting your thoughts on your memo.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So should we issue a memo to the town board suggesting that we are in favor of this and we support this this change?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion to put together such a memo and have staff draft it and then send it off to me for the town board?
So move.
Second. Eldad?
Aye.
Dick?
Aye.
All right, Tom?
Oh, geez, aye.
Greg?
Voted already.
Aye.
All right, I'm live, 5-0, so it's all set. And the last item we have, which I don't have, but the minutes from April 21.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I didn't get it in my packet. Yeah,
I
never saw
actually
it.
sent an email to you. They weren't ready, so I took
okay.
them off the agenda.
Okay, excellent. So I think we're all set. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
Bob, hang on a second. I got something, if I may, something off agenda for a second.
Sure.
I'd like to, Sabrina, can you let us know what the status is of the Hamlet rezoning EIS scoping language?
Oop, hang on.
Sabrina, you're on mute.
You've muted yourself.
Sabrina?
So sorry. So sorry. Last week, the town board approved the scoping outline for the DGEIS. So the consultant team is moving forward to prepare the DGEIS. They incorporated some comments from the public scoping process and didn't incorporate other comments. And they also approved of a change order that was submitted by the consultant team to address some of the additional public comments that came in and were incorporated into the scoping document.
So do we get to see that?
It is posted online. If you would like a version emailed to you, I'm happy to do that.
Well, didn't we make a formal produce a formal memo in this process, or did we not? I forget. Did we send out?
You did. You did.
Yes, we did.
So why do we have to go on it? Yes, I would like, I mean, I think that I'd like to have a copy of it. If we have to go online to find it, that'd be fine, but it seems.
Yeah, no.
We're going to close.
Under secret, it should be circulated.
Aren't we an involved agency?
Yeah, under secret, it needs to be circulated to the planning board and all the other involved agencies.
Thank you.
The planning board is not an involved agency. It is an interested agency.
Right.
Okay.
So it was posted, I believe it was posted where it was supposed to be posted. I will check on that. I am happy to distribute the planning board a copy of the scoping outline.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yep,
I think we're all concerned about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. No problem.
Anyone else any questions?
I also wanted for the board's information, we do not have applications to be reviewed at your next scheduled meeting of May 19th. So our next meeting would be the June 2nd meeting. Yes.
All right, and who knows? We might be able to meet live by then, right?
No way.
Dream on.
Would that
Come on.
Are we in what? Are we in phase 2?
No.
It is yet to be determined.
Okay,
Yet to be determined what the full reopening process for town hall is. I can
Right.
tell you that public meetings have not yet been authorized, at least in the first phase of the opening.
right.
Jennifer, maybe you, do you have any answer? Maybe Sabrina, you do information on this? When these, whenever it happens that town meetings, public town meetings are allowed or authorized, I don't know what the right language is, are board members obligated to attend?
I think.
I
we'll
say, you
have to
know,
wait and see.
We
Yeah,
are
it's all-
working on processes right now, Tom, for reopening. I think that is a very valid question. We have been talking about how to implement safe social distancing when we've been given the mandate to open up. I think that if there's a desire by members of this board to still appear virtually at meetings, while some members are present, we can definitely take that information. If you want to send me an email as to your preference, I'm happy to carry that into the consideration of how we do this.
No, I have no preference. I mean, there are too many unknowns right now. I was just curious whether there was a policy about this yet. That's all.
Not yet.
Just remember that under the open meetings law, absent the governor's executive orders, when you do appear by video conference, the public notice has to include the location at which you're conferencing from, and you have to make that location open to members of the public. So that portion of the open meetings law was suspended by the governor's executive orders. So a lot of it, you're going to need to take that into consideration, if you're going to choose to appear virtually when the executive orders are lifted.
You're telling me people are going to come to my house?
We'll be there, Tom.
If you appear by conference, they may.
That's fine. I'll just release the hounds.
Serve some cookies.
And we know where your bar is located.
Can I borrow the hounds as the Wetlands Changing Environmental Coordinator? I just may need them. Thank you.
Anytime, I'm sure. You'll be
Okay.
happy to do that.
Great. All right, any other business? If not, is there a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We'll just do this all at once, right? Come on, for old time's sake. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All right.
Aye, aye,
Okay.
aye.
See you guys in a couple weeks.